Hi folks, hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to be looking at how to answer the support and oppose question for National 5 Modern Studies. So this is mainly a video for my nationals. Hope you are listening. Hope you're going to enjoy this and it's going to help the question make sense. But I also thought I would set it up so that anyone who is taking National 5 Modern Studies could watch this and listen to this, and hopefully will help the question to make sense. So this is up to date as of June 2020, so how the question's formed and how to answer it. So just going to be going through that today, and hopefully it helps the question to make a bit more sense and just gives you a structure that you can follow to see how you can pick up all of the marks for this question. So looking at the support and oppose question today for National 5 Modern Studies. So today we're going to be considering the structure and layout of answering the support and oppose exam question, and we'll be developing your understanding of how you earn the marks in one of these questions. How are you actually going to pick up the marks? Because that's really important to know. You're not just answering the question just to answer it and try and get past it and move on to the next one. You're actually answering it in a way that's going to pick up all the marks that you're wanting to get, so you can do really well. So, support and oppose question. The support and oppose question is one of 3 source questions you will have to answer in an exam. Some people might call it the exaggeration or the bias question. But the support oppose, it's one of the 3 questions you have. The other 2, you have kind of your option choice decision making question, and then you also have your conclusions question as well. Certainly those are the 3 we have at the moment. So you will have to answer one of each of these types of questions in the exam, and each of them will always be worth 10 marks. So it works out as 10% of your whole National 5 Modern Studies course comes down just to the support oppose question. So that's why you want to do really well in it. It's a similar situation for the other 2 source questions. They are both worth 10 marks. They are both worth 10% of your whole course. So the skills questions or source questions together, that's 30% of your mark just on them. So that's why we want to do really well on them. So for this type of question, you will be given 3 sources of information, and then you will be given a statement from an individual. It might be a real person like Nicola Sturgeon, or it could be just a name given to somebody who has a point of view. And so you've got 3 sources and you have a statement. And essentially, how this question works is that you will need to use the 3 sources of information to find pieces of evidence that support the statement from the individual, so that they agrees with it and says yes, what they've said is correct, and pieces of evidence that oppose their statement or disagree with it and say what they've said is wrong. So you will need to find information on both sides of the argument. The good thing here is that you don't actually need to come to a conclusion. That's something that when you kind of move to higher level, you come to an overall conclusion. But for National 5, just evidence to support and to oppose the statement. Okay, a little bit of extra information. The question, it's not measuring your background knowledge. So you're only using the information from the 3 sources that are available. You don't want to be throwing anything. You might know things about the topic that you want to think, oh, maybe I'll throw that in, but it won't get you any marks. It's purely based on the sources themselves. You will gain 1 mark for each relevant piece of evidence you use in your answer. So essentially, it's 10 relevant pieces of evidence is going to get you your 10 marks. And I will explain the structure for that in a little bit. But essentially, for this question, you're just looking to tally up marks as you go by presenting evidence, and then some more, and then some more, and that's how you get your 10 marks. And lastly, for just now, if you want to try and get full marks, you need to use all 3 sources at some point in your answer. They don't necessarily need to, you don't need to use all 3 on your support side and all 3 on your oppose side. You just, at some point in your answer, you need to use all 3 sources at some point. Okay. Right. Here is an example of a support-oppose question. This is taken from the SQA 2019 specimen paper, which is on the SQA website. This particular example is looking at the House of Lords, which is a decision-making body. It's part of the House of Commons in the UK Houses of Parliament. And the House of Lords, the people who are in the House of Lords, they aren't elected. They're appointed to those positions because of certain areas of society where they're really successful, experience that they can bring. And although they are not elected, they are part of the decision-making process in the UK Parliament. Historically, you used to have lots and lots of hereditary peers who would just get their peerage from their parents and from their position. That is kind of reduced over time, but still, you have controversy over the House of Lords, whether it should be a fully elected chamber, just like the House of Commons. What is the role of the House of Lords? So, we see here that the statement is from Morag Watt, and she is saying that the House of Lords is in need of further reform, so that changes need to be made to the House of Lords. So that is her statement. That is what we're looking at. You need to give evidence that supports this view and evidence that opposes this view. And as it says there at the bottom, it is really clear. It's got that you need to support it, that you need to oppose it, and your answer must be based on all three sources if you want to have a chance at all 10 marks. I believe it's a maximum of 6 marks, I think, what you can get if you don't use all three sources. So we have source 1 over here, which is some text. We've got source 2, which is a table showing a comparison of House of Lords factors across 2 times from 1995 up to 2015, and then we've got the same factors but for the whole UK population from 1995 to 2015. So you can see how things have changed over time, but also compare between the House of Lords, how many males there are in the House of Lords, how many have an ethnic minority background, and you can compare that to the UK population. So, source 3, we've got some newspaper clippings and we've got a graph as well. And you'll see in these source questions that the information will be displayed in these different ways. It might be some text, a table, a graph, a section from a newspaper, something maybe from social media, these different forms of information to test your ability to draw out that information. So hopefully that's helpful. Come back to this if you want an example. The templates and the structure that I'm going to go over in a little bit, it's using the information from this question. So you might want to come and give it a go after you've watched this to see if you can put what I've discussed, to see if it makes sense and to see if it's a good way of working for you. So the House of Lords is in need of further reform. We need to support it and to oppose it. So how are we going to do that? So, how to answer. There are a few things to do before you start writing. The first of which might seem common sense and a bit trivial, but you need to read through the question. You need to take the time to read through it. This will help to ensure that you understand the topic that is being discussed and the statement that you need to look at, and it will help you to kind of avoid any of those simple mistakes that could end up costing you big marks if you kind of go down the wrong route. If you kind of think it's talking about the House of Commons or the Scottish Parliament rather than the House of Lords, things like that, where you could easily, if you make a mistake at the start, it's going to affect your whole answer. So reading through it helps to take away some of that and just gives you some time to understand, okay, what is it I need to do? Because remember, this is 10% of your whole course coming down to this question. Stage 2, I think is really important, and it's important for all of the source questions at national and at higher, is to highlight or underline certain pieces of information. And in this case, with a highlighter or different colored pens, you want to highlight or underline evidence that supports or opposes the statement, and you want to have a different color for each. So have one color for all the evidence that supports the statement, and one color for all the evidence that opposes the statement. So here we've got green for support and red for oppose, but it could be any colors. Really important, it just makes it very clear you know where your evidence is for both sides, then it's just a case of following the structure, as we'll go over it in a little second. So these steps, stage 1 and stage 2, really important before you start even writing your answer. So hope you're with me so far, hope this is making sense. Now let's look at stage 3, presenting your evidence. So this is now you actually writing your answer. How are you going to do that? So, as previously mentioned, you need to show 10 relevant pieces of evidence to get the full 10 marks. That's the process that we're following. There are different ways that you can approach this question, slightly different ways that it can be taught, but the approach that we're taking is each piece of evidence you put down, you're wanting to earn a mark for it. So it's really easy to pick up the marks. It's a really simple process to follow, hopefully, and will work really well for each of you. So, broadly speaking, you want to aim to have 5 pieces of evidence for support and then 5 for oppose. So 5 on each side, 10 in total. However, it's totally okay if you end up maybe with 6 that support and then 4 that oppose, or maybe even 7 that support and 3 that oppose. Or it could be the other way around. You could have 6 that oppose and only 4 that support, or 7 that oppose and only 3 that support. Any of those options are fine. The key thing is that you have 10 pieces of evidence in total and that you have multiple on either side, okay? So 10 in total, aim for 5 and 5, but if it's 6 and 4 or 7 and 3, that's going to be perfectly fine, okay? So, we've got that. Now, when presenting your evidence, there are a few things that you need to make clear. If you want to get your mark for your bit of evidence, there are a few things you need to make clear to the marker, okay? So, the first thing is you need to make it clear, is this evidence that supports or opposes the statement, or the person who's made the statement? What side is it on? You need to make that clear. You need to say what source your evidence comes from. That's a really important point that often can get missed. You need to say, what source does your evidence come from? You need to actually show what your evidence is. What is it that you're presenting? What is it that you've taken out of one of the sources? And you need to say, is it clear why this evidence does support or oppose the statement? So that needs to be clear as well. Sometimes that, just by presenting the evidence, it's clear whether it supports or opposes, but sometimes it's something that you need to explain a little bit more in order to make it really clear. So we've got those things that we need to cover. Done correctly, this can all be done in one sentence, okay? So, although there's a few bullet points, in one sentence you can quickly cover all these things. So, on the next slide, this is where we start getting into our actual structure. On the next slide, I've got kind of a blank template that you can follow, that you can just rinse and repeat for your whole answer, essentially. So I've got a blank template, and then I've got a filled-in example using the 2019 specimen paper. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this, okay? So, here we go. For your blank template, this is what it could look like. So there's a lot of colors on here and lots of bits in bold, but I've tried to do it so that you can clearly see what links to what when I show the filled in example. So our blank template, one piece of evidence that, and then you put in either supports or opposes, and then you need to put in the name of the person who has the statement. So bits to fill in here. So one piece of evidence that supports, Morag Watt is the name of our person, is in source, and then you need to put what your source is, either 1, 2, or 3, or sometimes it could be A, B, or C for some of the examples you do in class. So is in source 1, 2, or 3, where it states, and then you say what your evidence is. You present it clearly using the information from the source. You then say which supports or opposes the name of the person, because, and then you maybe need to give a bit of a reason as to why that evidence does support or oppose the statement of the person. So sometimes you might not need to, this last step here, you might not need to do it as much, but it is important to make sure that you've said why it kind of supports or opposes the statement. You need to make that clear in your answer. So, we've got our blank template there. Now we've got gonna look at a completed example using the 2019 specimen paper. Let's kind of fill in the blanks and see what that looks like. So here we have it. One piece of evidence that supports Morag Watt is in source 3, where it states the House of Lords has just 2 peers under the age of 40. Peers is the name for the people who sit in the House of Lords. So, it's in source 3 where it states the House of Lords has just 2 peers under the age of 40, which supports Morag Watt because it shows how changes need to be made to the House of Lords in order to better represent all age groups. There you go. That's filled in each of the blanks with either supports or opposed. We've got the name of the person in there. We've got our evidence. We've got why it matters, why it supports the statement. That earns you 1 mark. We've covered everything in 1 sentence. So there we go. That is a template that we're going to be following, and it's going to help you really quickly pick up the marks. You just could repeat this. So you have this here to support Morag Watt. Then you just say another piece of evidence that supports Morag Watt is in source 1, where it says, and so forth. And then you just continue, answer, and you quickly pick up the marks. So hopefully that makes sense. I will say there are occasions where you might be able to link together 2 relevant pieces of evidence into 1 answer. So it can be helpful to use the phrase, "this is backed up by," in these sorts of cases. So there sometimes in the different sources, there's evidence that you can link together and think, oh, if I put those 2 bits together, that's what makes a really good point, rather than one of them on their own. So we've got an example here again from the 2019 specimen paper to kind of show this process. So it's using a similar template to what we had before, so let's have a look at this. Another piece of evidence that supports Morag Watt is in source 2, where it states that less than 5% of the House of Lords comes from an ethnic minority background. So there we have 1 piece of evidence. We've put in a full stop there. This is backed up by source 2, which also shows that ethnic minority groups make up 13% of the UK population, supporting Morag Watt as it shows how the House of Lords needs to change to better represent different ethnic groups. So there we have an answer that's worth 2 marks, because we have 2 pieces of evidence that together it shows how there are less people from an ethnic minority background in the House of Lords compared to the UK population. There is our comparison. One of those on its own wouldn't be as strong if it wasn't paired with the other. So by putting them together, by using that "this is backed up by," that's what gives you a really good answer that's worth 2 marks instead of 1, because you've got 2 relevant pieces of information in there, 2 relevant examples. And it's possible to even, you can have some answers that use 2 pieces of evidence from 2 different sources with a bit of analysis in there. That can get you 3 marks for an answer. But we won't dive into that too much because we want to keep on this simple, straightforward structure. So I thought I would mention that you can link together these different bits of evidence to gain more marks. But we want to stick on the simple road where it's easy to pick up the marks. Okay, so that's essentially the structure. You just continue to use that for both the support and opposed sides. As long as you cover those things, it's going to be really easy to pick up the marks and get the 10 marks you're after. Just a couple of things before we finish. If you follow this process for all 10 pieces of evidence, making sure you cover both the support and opposed sides, and that you have used all 3 sources somewhere in your answer, you'll earn all 10 marks. However, remember to take the time to read through the question and highlight or underline your evidence before you start. I can't stress how important that it is. It makes it so much easier to write your answer. And instead of having to kind of, as you're writing, think, oh, where's the evidence? I've only got 3 points. I need more for this. Rather than getting in that kind of confusion, you know, okay, I have my 10 bits of evidence. It's just a case of following the structure and slotting everything in. So as I said, it'll make the writing process a lot easier. And as I've said, there are other ways to approach this question, but this structure is really simple, hopefully really straightforward to follow to really easily pick up the marks. Okay, folks, hope that's been useful to kind of set up the support opposed question. And kind of it's built on the 2019 specimen question. You've got 3 marks here all ready to go. Now would be a case of seeing if you could answer the rest of the question and then get in that practice of using this structure and answering support opposed questions to build up that practice. Okay, folks, hope this has been useful. I will leave it there and see you later. Thanks for listening.